Oh, crap, hey, didn't see you there. Well, what's going on, guys? That's pretty awkward. I was just looking at the Bitcoin chart and bumping my homie's tracks on SoundCloud like any good friend would do. But hey, now that you're here, that's a perfect time to bring back another Borderlands 3 video like I'm often known for. How are you guys doing? In today's video, I'm going to talk about Borderlands 3's top failures. These are pretty much all the reasons that I stopped playing Borderlands 3 at the beginning of the year. And in fact, I wrote this video in January of this year. Some of you who follow my Twitter know that. And yeah, I just haven't felt like posting it because I stopped playing Borderlands, which means I lost my passion for the game. And these are all the reasons why. Now, this is a script I wrote. It's not even edited, really. It was just kind of a rough draft, off the top, Reddit rant, like full giga-blown, like frustration, rage, and I'm just going to use this as a guiding point rather than reading it to you guys. And I'm just going to tell you guys what I think all the failures of Borderlands 3 were. Hey, quick interruption and advertisement. This one is sponsored by Tier 1 Game Design, which is a game company that I started with my best friend. Here's our website, tier1gamedesign.com. We released a game called Escape from Stoneheim, hey guys. Which is like a mini kind of, it's really similar to Uno in a sense. It's not similar to Uno in the gameplay, but it's similar to like, it's a small card game that you can play very quickly with family and friends. And also, we're hoping to sell out so that we can start our other games. We have many other awesome games, mainly American Dream and Turbo Quest. Go to our website, tier1gamedesign.com, and buy our game, Escape from Stoneheim, to help support us. Thanks. So for those of you who have already been following my channel, you guys already know the background we have with this game. And those of you who are new to the channel, I have been playing this game since launch. That's kind of a weird wording. I started playing this game at launch, and I played for about a year to 2 years straight, or maybe it was a year and a half, I forget. But I lived through all of the updates, the patches, like live every single week. From the start of this game's launch, I had every patch notes open, and it's proven because I've posted tons of patch notes videos, and the ones that I didn't post, believe me, I had patch notes open the freaking hour they came out every single time. So I have a lot of experience in this game, and this game has had a pretty rocky past. You know, it obviously Borderlands is a great game and a great series, but it's had a lot of issues with it that have driven players away, and it's driven me away. And like I said, I wrote this video in January, but I'm finally just coming around to posting it, mainly because I kind of want a conclusion for my YouTube channel. Well, I mean, not that my YouTube channel's over, but a conclusion for the Borderlands chapter in our YouTube channel, because I am done with this game for a lot of reasons, and yeah, that's what I'm going to explain in this video. So let's just go ahead and go through this Google Doc. I'm really just going to rant off the cuff, but we're going to go with like the stuff that I wrote, right? So first things first, this says Thick Fillet Cow YouTube intro. Let's go. Good old times, am I right? Now, yeah, so first things first on the list is the main story. So basically, one of Borderlands 3's most criticized things, this isn't even really from my opinion, although the story was a bit lackluster from my opinion, but I'm just a person who doesn't play video games for story all the time, and I fully understand that video games do not have good stories. My proof of that is every video game movie ever, you know, probably with a few exceptions, has sucked. You know, video games don't have the best stories, so I'm not a huge person who likes to criticize this point, but this was like the most, like, dude, Ava, like, how many times have we heard Ava bad since Borderlands 3 came out? You know, they slightly made up for it with the last DLC they put out, but not really. You know, come on, let's be real. Everybody hates Ava. So that's the first thing we're going to be talking about, is the main storyline and kind of what they messed up and how they could have fixed it. So it's pretty obvious to me. You know, I'm not an expert storyteller, but, you know, if you guys noticed, I posted a couple Among Us videos on this channel, and one thing I learned from Among Us that is perfectly applicable to this situation is that humans are fully emotional creatures, and the emotions that we feel through storytelling really have an effect on us, like a more profound effect than most people realize. And what were the main emotions you guys got with Borderlands 3 story? It was awkward, emo, cringy, like, you know, not that Borderlands isn't a cringy game, but they went over the top cringe to the point where I don't think people necessarily saw the satire they were trying to create, because let's be real, they made a great point in this game. They like took a streamer, they made them the evil villain of this game because it's a satire on how we worship like celebrities and stuff like that so hard. Like there is a message in there. Obviously, I'm like oversimplifying it, but my point is nobody really, I mean, people did get this message, but they got those emotions of awkward cringiness, emo, goth, like those kind of vibes, mainly from Ava in this game. And yeah, so really that's my main thing, like my main criticism was the emotions. And another example I'll bring up is Borderlands 2. Obviously, a lot of people don't like comparing Borderlands 2 to Borderlands 3, but it's going to be kind of hard not to do, because let's talk about Borderlands 2 for a second. If we're being honest, for its time, Borderlands 2 was insanely cringy as well. It wasn't awkward and angsty as much, but it was definitely cringy. But they leveled it out because at the same time, it wasn't the most overbearing principle. It was more so that they really did tell their story, and at the same time, they just let this cringiness be a part of it. And at the end of Borderlands 2, it was pretty satisfying with the deaths that happened. Jack's daughter, like, you kind of understood, you know, he was a villain that we could once again emotionally connect to. Those emotions are really important. And Roland dying at the end of BL2. Yeah, so that's all I'm going to say about that. And yeah, let's just go ahead and skip over this pacing part because I don't really care about that. And yeah, so number 2 on the list of Borderlands 3's top failures is the end game. Now, I am going to kind of go with this. This end game thing I have written out is just straight up comparing Borderlands 2's endgame to Borderlands 3's endgame. Once again, I know some of you don't like to compare it, but Borderlands 3 has been out for over 2.5 years now, and also there are some points I'm going to make about their intentions with this game and just how that is a big issue in my opinion. So in Borderlands 2, in the base game, we have Vermivorous and Terramorphous. This is 2 raid bosses in the base game, and you guys are going to see a trend here. Then we have Captain Scarlet DLC, which came out October 16th, 2012. This introduced Hyperius the Invincible and Master Yi. Next, we have Mr. Torg's Campaign of Carnage, which came out November 20th, 2012. And this introduced Pete the Invincible, a 5th raid boss now. Then we had the addition of UVHM and the Digistruct Peak. Now, I'm not 100% sure if Digistruct Peak came with any sort of raid bosses, but it came with a repeatable endgame activity, as well as adding over levels, which were similar to Mayhem levels. And yeah, so that is definitely an endgame activity. Next, we have Sir Hammerlock's Big Game Hunt, which came with Veracitus and Dexiduous, another 2 raid bosses. Then we had Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep, which came with the Ancient Dragons of Destruction, more raid bosses. Next, we have Sir Hammerlock versus the Son of Cromarax, which literally is just more raid bosses. And then finally, we have the Commander Lilith fight for Sanctuary DLC, and that came with another raid boss for a whopping total of about 8+ raid bosses, Digistruct Peak, as well as some Circle of Slaughters in Borderlands 2. So that's a decent amount of endgame. Okay, yeah. Now, let's go ahead and just compare this to Borderlands 3. Borderlands 3 comes out September 13th, 2019. Base game, 0 raid bosses, 3 Circle of Slaughters, which are great, and you're going to see a trend here, where these don't continue, and there's also no raid bosses. Next, we did have the Malawan Takedown come out November 21st, which came with 1 takedown and 1 raid boss. Now, obviously, the takedowns is the best content Borderlands has ever come out with. I'm sorry, but the Malawan Takedown is their best activity ever, and they never tried to make whatever. Anyways, then we have the Handsome Jackpot DLC. DLC 1, 0 raid bosses, 0 Circle of Slaughters. DLC 2, Love Guns and Tentacles, 0 raid bosses, 0 Circle of Slaughters. Revenge of the Cartel events, 0 raid bosses, and a cool endgame experience because, you know, let's be honest, the Cartel event is a cool endgame experience. It adds more onto the game, and it's cool. Next, we have the Guardian Takedown. Finally, another takedown. This one had problems of its own, but once again, I actually have the opinion that this is a very awesome takedown, and they still should be releasing more takedowns, but let's just go ahead and keep going. Next, we have DLC 3, Bounty of Blood, 0 raid bosses, 0 Circle of Slaughters. The Krieg DLC, 0 raid bosses, 0 Circle of Slaughters. Director's Cut, 0 raid bosses, 0 Circle of Slaughters. But it does come with Arms Race, which is a replayable piece of content, but it is not endgame content. I'm sorry, you can do this at level 13, and it's the same piece of content at level 65. It doesn't use any of your endgame gear or fully leveled builds, so it is not endgame content, but it is a replayable piece of DLC content, so that's like, you know, some points. And then finally we have Designer's Cut, which comes with 1 raid boss and 0 Circle of Slaughters. This is a total of 3 raid bosses, 3 Circle of Slaughters, and 1 really awesome Revenge of the Cartels map, because I'm not gonna lie, I really wish there was a raid boss in Cartels, okay, but that is the only thing it's missing. Otherwise, it's like chef's kiss, great piece of content, so it counts as endgame content. Now, what is the main problem between Borderlands 2 and Borderlands 3, which I am sorry, but Gearbox, who was working at your company and literally came out to the public when the game was launched and decided to say, we are not releasing raid bosses in this game, except for takedowns. And then you guys changed your mind later anyways. So, like, what was the point of this? And we're going to go ahead and get into the reason why this kind of thinking was flawed and how they could have easily fixed it. Now, another thing I want to mention is obviously COVID happened soon after this game was launched, although it didn't even actually happen until after DLC 2. So I think they released 2 full DLCs and the base game with 0 intention of raid bosses, which is just such a weird thing in my opinion. Like, the thing they tried to do with this game was to just be different for the sake of being different. And while I like that, and that is one of the biggest redeeming factors of Borderlands, you need to keep your fundamentals in place. You cannot have different fundamentals. And I'm sorry, but it's just how life is. If you fuck up your fundamentals, you fuck up your life. And you guys decided to do no raid bosses in the base game, as well as lots of other stuff that you decided to just be different for the sake of it. And like, with some of the stuff, it's okay, but with a game like Borderlands, which is a looter shooter, you have gear that people are going to collect through their entire, that's their whole end game, is collecting fully leveled gear and then fully tooled builds in general with full skill trees. Okay, like, the fact that there was no Circle of Slaughter in the Love, Guns, and Tentacles DLC, we could have had a freaking loader bot Circle of Slaughter with a wave of scrap traps. Like, how cool does that sound? A wave of those one-shot infected shark enemies. Like, that just sounds like Borderlands fun that I love and that I want. But for some reason, we didn't create a small map that's just a box that's not too in-depth with a wave of reusable assets running at your face that you can shoot and blow up. I just think this is a major flaw in the game, and it just has to be said. Alrighty, I think I said enough about that. Let's go ahead and talk about the freaking balance of this game, because every single one of you know that this game has 0 balance. And once again, I kind of think this kind of goes with the idea of being different just to be different. The way they balance this game, it feels like each person who works at Gearbox developed a different gun with a completely different set of rules, and then they all just threw it into the same game without testing or figuring anything out or doing, like, the quality testing is not up to par in my opinion, and I will definitely explain why and prove that within this video. But when it comes to balance, we have 3 things we need to talk about: Mayhem 2, the characters, and then finally the weapons and gear. So let's go ahead and first talk about Mayhem 2.0. So it's the #1 thing on this list because this is the #1 thing that completely ruined the balance of this game. The balance of this game actually felt good from Mayhem 1 all the way to Mayhem 4. And it was not until Mayhem 2, well, okay, I'm sorry. When Mayhem 4 was originally introduced, It threw the game a little bit out of balance, and it was too difficult for a lot of players with the gear at the time. But after they started buffing some weapons for Mayhem 4, it felt good again. Now, they did over-buff some weapons a little bit, in my opinion, but not too much, and they said they were doing this for Mayhem 2.0, and they didn't even buff them enough when Mayhem 2.0 came out. And that's my whole point. For those of you who played this game when Mayhem 2.0 was launched, the game felt unplayable for many, many players for almost a full month before they resolved a lot of the issues. With the health scaling, they ended up pulling back the health scaling. Guardian Takedown was almost unplayable for many characters and many players. Even though Zane got the See Undead class mod and got that upgrade in DLC 1, he was very difficult, and you needed to have like a perfectly rolled redistributor when Mayhem 2.0 came out for it to even work. Otherwise, you had to use the Revenge of the Cartel's weapons. They literally released this game mode where like almost nothing worked in it, and that was the full endgame system, and it was just kind of insane. And let me just go ahead and get into the numbers. At Mayhem 1, enemies get a bonus 200% health. At Mayhem 10, enemies get a bonus 10,000% health. And like I said, I get that Borderlands whole shtick is, ooh, big shiny number means better. But it threw off the balance of the game completely. And that's really it when I'm going to talk about Mayhem 2.0. The overscaling was just not enough, or was too much, or maybe the Mayhem scaling was just not enough. And that's one way they could have fixed it. They could have just flat out buffed the Mayhem scaling of the weapons themselves. And there was also no action skill scaling when Mayhem 2.0 came out. There was no grenade damage scaling, no shield damage scaling. There was no scaling at all for this Mayhem game mode, and nothing worked in it without insane scaling. And so now that I kind of mentioned that, let's talk about weapons and gear. Now, on this one, I pretty much told you guys why the balance was off, but I'm going to more so talk about their choices and decisions over the course of Borderlands history, Borderlands 3's history, with their absurd scaling and their choices of what got buffed and what got nerfed. And I'm going to bring up this article right here that shows, this was a popular post on Reddit where someone wrote, wow, Gearbox nerfed so much. And they counted all the hotfixes, and they said they buffed, or 90% of the hotfixes were buffs, and only 10% were nerfs. But the issue with this is, number one, at the beginning of the game's life cycle, they did all the nerfs to where players were so upset that they literally came out and said, okay, we're not nerfing anything anymore. So that's the first point. Second point, can we talk about how misleading this is? Number one, there are a number of useless buffs that happened. Can we talk about how the Malawan Takedown sniper rifle has been buffed like at least 5 times? And I'm not even exaggerating on that number. Did this guy count that buff the 5 separate weeks it happened? And can we talk about how the Malawan Takedown still doesn't work? Okay, well, I'm sorry. I wrote this video a year ago. A year ago, the Malawan Takedown still didn't work, which is a year and a half into the life cycle of Borderlands 3, and this gun got 5 buffs at that point in time. I don't know. Maybe they buffed it again and it works now, but that's a 6th buff. You know what I mean? So is this taking that into account? Also, how about, like I said, when Mayhem 2.0 came out, they buffed like at least 100 of the items for Mayhem 2.0. But that's because the balance of the game mode didn't work. If they didn't buff those items, they would literally be unusable and unplayable in the game mode. And yeah, so now I kind of want to criticize how they decided to nerf things in the beginning of the game. And it wasn't and they got the whole, they completely misunderstood why people were upset. People were upset because they overly nerfed some items that were slightly overperforming. There were some things that were definitely overperforming that could have been brought back in line, and at the end of the day, it didn't really affect the entire gameplay loop. But the Moe's grenades thing, in my opinion, was too much because, they should have just, I don't know, they just limited what grenades she was able to use. But I'm going to bring up the Crossroads. The Crossroads was honestly barely overperforming in Mayhem 4. A lot of people were using it to kill Wotan, and it was just an amazing feeling gun. This gun was barely overperforming in Mayhem 4, but it was a good freaking gun. And then, DLC 5, they released the Arms Race game mode, and starting at level 13, you can get the strongest gun in the game at the time, which was called the Plasma Coil, which fully leveled to level 60 at the time, was the max when the Plasma Coil came out, or maybe it was 65. This thing had 100,000 damage on the card, or something insane like that, and it's a fast-firing SMG. So they nerf a gun for barely overperforming, and then they release the strongest SMG in the game that requires almost nothing to destroy the hardest content. And it's just like, how do we get from a place where early on in the game, you guys are over-nerfing, and then late in the game, you're doing the exact opposite? And like, what I can easily say is that an exact opposite reaction is never going to be the correct answer. And it just feels like there was not a lot of thought put into this. And yeah, I will kind of prove that even more as well later. And yeah, so another example is early on they nerfed the ion cannon when it came out. They made it consume 6 bullets instead of 1. And then in the most recent DLC, DLC 6, they release a power-crept ion cannon called the Kick Charger, which does more damage than the ion cannon, and it only consumes 1 bullet now. So there was just no sense of what's it called? Kind of similar to fundamentals. There was no like balance theory that was used in balancing these weapons because they all got random different treatment that is completely illogical when looked at next to each other. And once again, just is what it is. Finally, when it comes to balance, let's talk about the characters in Borderlands 3. And what better way to sum that up than with this chart I got from Quag, who is another Borderlands content creator. He didn't like send this to me specifically for this video. He just posted this chart a while ago on his Twitter, and I went and ripped it because it's perfect for my point here. And let's go ahead and go over what this chart does. Can I open this in like a different window or zoom in? Excuse me. All right, so this is hard to see and read, but I will just read to you what's going on. So all the way on the left, you can see these little names. I'll read these out loud because you probably can't read them on the YouTube video. So all the way on the left, we have Krieg's initial hit, which has like, you know, almost 0 damage. Then we have Amara, which her damage formula adds up to about 0. Then we have Flak, which his damage formula adds up to about like 3 times 0. Then we have Aurelia, which is from a previous game, who apparently does more damage than Flak. Then we have Zero, who does like 10 times more damage than Aurelia. Then we have Maya, who does a little more damage than Zero. Then we have Krieg with Bloodsplosion, who does about double Maya. Then we have Zane, who's about a triple Bloodsplosion Krieg. At least just on the first hit, you know, because Krieg Bloodsplosion can go pretty infinite, I'm pretty sure. And then we have Salvador, who people like to call the most broken character in Borderlands history, who is like, this looks like about 2.5 Zanes. And then finally, we got Mommy Milker Mose with a grand slam whopping top of the chart, 2 trillion damage. Shout out to Moxie. Anyways, so yeah, this is once again their balance thesis on how they decide to balance characters throughout the Borderlands franchise, let alone just Borderlands 3, because here's Amara, here's Flak, here's Zane, and here's Mose. Now, the issue with this is a number of things. It's the damage formulas between the skill trees, as well as skill tree disparity. Another thing I want to bring up is the skill trees within the characters. Mose's red tree does see play, but the damage within it is not comparable. Okay, I'm sorry. Any of Mose's skill trees are not comparable to her blue tree and the one skill in her purple tree because they get so much mayhem scaling. Zane, he has his blue tree, which is insane, his green tree, which you only have to spend points in to get to the barrier, or, you know, a lot of people wouldn't even spend points in this tree if they didn't have to. And then finally, his purple tree. At Zane's green tree is honestly really bad. His red tree is honestly pretty bad, except that it's the clone tree, so the action skill makes it good. But the red tree itself is bad, and I have explained this in so many past videos. I'm not going to do it now. And then they just release a DLC purple tree for Zane, which blows the rest of the trees out of the water, and his purple tree and all the buffs and stuff they've added to Zane is the only reason he's up here, if we're being honest. And yeah, anyways, so there's just a lot of character disparity, like skill tree disparity. And listen, I'm not saying that all characters have to be equal, you know, everyone has to fit into a cookie cutter lunchbox. But what I am saying is they could be a little bit closer, or, you know, maybe if they want one character's tree to be stronger than another character, because there's certain gives and takes, like attack and defense, you know, maybe we can do it in such a way that it's more intentional, rather than just throwing a bunch of stuff into a video game and seeing if it works. You know, maybe we can use a little bit of math and a little bit of damage formulas. And if you guys didn't know, all right, I don't have the link on hand, but there are literal Google Docs, which some of my old friends in the community, which I no longer really speak with, shout out to you guys if you're watching, but some of those guys have put a lot of work into, as well as I have put in a lot of work into some Zane math formulas, just Zane specific ones. But yeah, there is easy ways to do the math in this game, and it just requires some testing. And that's what we should do to balance things, is we should test them. And yeah, you see I wrote right here, my solution to this is simply using damage formulas to balance Vault Hunters, DPS formulas to balance each gun, and a mayhem system with damage and sorry, I've been talking nonstop for a while. And a mayhem system with damage and HP scaling that actually makes sense, so that it doesn't throw off 90% of the game's story content, as well as throwing off the endgame content. Oh yeah, that was another point I brought up in here, is that all of the balance changes they did revolved around mayhem. The mayhem system threw off the game so hard that they reacted to it in such a way that I proved to you guys that very little of this game was endgame. Most of this game's maps are story missions, but all the balancing is done as if it's endgame. The whole story, like running through a story in this game, is so easy now, because like everything is so power crept, and you just walk 5 feet and you find a legendary. At level 13, you can go do arms race and get legendaries for days, and it ruins the game story because everything is balanced for endgame. And it's whack. Next, number 4, I already talked about Mayhem Mode 2.0, but oh, believe me, there is more, that it got its own section in the video. This section is called Mayhem Mode 2.0. Now, let's go ahead. I am just gonna kind of read with this one, because this one does have a little bit of history. So, for those of you who haven't played this game since the start, Mayhem 2.0 was actually released after Mayhem 1.0 was underwhelming for most players. A lot of us playing at the time didn't enjoy it. Now, remember, I started off this video, whatever. Anyways, Mayhem 1.0 came out. It had some really random, annoying modifiers that either halved your damage or doubled your damage for no reason at all, and sometimes would just invalidate pieces of your gear, and people would literally save quit to reload their Mayhem modifiers. And it also had stuff like bullet reflection. So they came out with Mayhem 2.0, which for some reason still has elemental immunity in it, for no reason, and it just added a bunch of modifiers, which I actually have to applaud Gearbox's creativity with Mayhem 2.0, but many of these modifiers were not play-tested thoroughly, because they would have realized that most of these modifiers are more annoying than they are difficult. They just added a bunch of frickin' annoying stuff in Mayhem 2.0. They didn't actually add any actual difficulty with their quote-unquote difficulty system. And meanwhile, they put all the difficulty into the health scaling, which gave people unreasonable expectations of a difficulty slider, and then they also had to go to Mayhem 10 to get the best loot and gear. There was no real, like, stepping ladder for how this stuff all panned out, and I'm gonna kind of get into this more and make more sense of it. So yeah, let's just go ahead into exactly what I mean. So with Mayhem 2.0, I already explained to you about how the modifiers were annoying, what they should have done for Mayhem mode, or Mayhem modifiers. Let's just talk about it. The best Mayhem modifier was the Revenge of the Cartels event. Was it not? It sure was, in my opinion. The literal best Mayhem modifier was a event, Revenge of the Cartels. Extra enemies would spawn, with extra badasses sometimes and extra mini bosses. Like, what kind? How does that not sound like extra difficulty? And for some reason, instead, they just add laser spinners. They add the floor is lava. They add random cryo damage to also slow you down. Random elemental immunity. Once again, these are just annoying modifiers. There is not one modifier that adds actual difficulty to this game. In the Mayhem 2.0 system, we can go ahead and bring up something like the very hard one, roguelike, where it removes Fight for Your Life. Well, the problem with that is they designed this game in the first place to put you into Fight for Your Life. There's literal barrels and certain enemies that ignore your health gate, which is a BM system when there's no Fight for Your Life. You know, Fight for Your Life's a part of this game, so they designed it with that in mind, and then they put a whole Mayhem modifier which goes against that. And it would be very fun. It actually would be an awesome Mayhem modifier, but they did not take into account that they have barrels in the game, and that's just simplifying it extremely. But, like, that really sums up why stuff like that doesn't work, and how, like, they inevitably just added annoyances rather than actual difficulty. Next, what was I talking about? Next, let's talk about how Mayhem 1 through 10 didn't have good progression in it, and it gave players unreasonable expectations of a difficulty slider. They made it so you can jump from Mayhem 1 to Mayhem 10, get any Mayhem 10 weapons, and then farm for more Mayhem 10 weapons so there's no progression, while at the same time, for players who wanted difficulty and players who didn't want difficulty, were forced to play the same game mode. Now, I get what you're saying. You don't have to play Mayhem 10. You know, it's your option. You can play a lower game mode for easier difficulty. But the issue with this is their Mayhem weapon system. At the end of this game, at the end of the day, this game is a looter shooter, and players want to collect the strongest loot. So when you have the strongest loot locked behind your quote-unquote difficulty system, it makes the entitled players of this game... sorry, I had to roast you guys real quick and call you entitled. But anyways, because it's true. But that's not the point. You're allowed to be entitled, and I get that you want the strongest loot. So that's why they should have cut off Mayhem weapons at, like, Mayhem 6, so that way no one ever has to go past Mayhem 6 or Mayhem 8 maybe, and, like, add actual difficulty. Like, is it too much to ask to make hard difficulty hard and easy difficulty easy, so that way those players can actually segregate? Because, you know, a little bit of separation in player bases who want a little bit of a different experience is a good thing. You know, like, there's that whole argument online about how Dark Souls should have an easy mode for players who want to enjoy it. Well, Borderlands needs a hard mode for players who want to enjoy it. And they did not really add real options for that. The other thing is that most players are forced up to Mayhem 10 because if you have a friend that plays this game, let's say they play on Mayhem 8 and you play on Mayhem 3. Well, there's no Mayhem level that you both can enjoy together. You pretty much just can't play together on those characters, or your friend's just going to have to level up, or you're going to be overpowered when you play with them. And there needs to be that separation, and there just needs to be that middle ground. And I think that's about it for Mayhem 2.0. So yeah, finally, we're going to talk about the bugs in this game and the quality testing in this game. Now, listen. Borderlands is a giant RPG game with millions of basic combinations, hundreds of legendary unique effect weapons, hundreds at least, if not maybe up to 1,000, and then 16 different skill trees with how many skills in each? 25 skills in each, so what's 16 times 25? Do the math. Tons of maps, tons of enemies to fight. I am not setting an unreasonable expectation. I expect this game to have bugs in it, and I expect them to be able to fix some of these bugs. Literally, every game ever has bugs. The thing about Borderlands, though, is that it has had the most bugs I have ever seen in a video game, and more... there's probably another game out there that's buggier, and go ahead and put it in the comment section down below. I'm sorry, I haven't played it. But anyways, there's weirder bugs than ever, and a lot of insanely obvious bugs that, in my opinion, should not make it through quality testing, especially because there are literal bugs in the actual hot fixes they put out that are super obvious that I'm basically going to be exposing, because how come nobody gets mad at this kind of stuff? I mean, I don't know. I think people did, and they quit the game, and they just never said anything. Because that's what I did. But finally, I'm kind of, saying something in this video. So let's go ahead and talk about it. So there are more obvious bugs than ever in this game, and I truly believe that they do not have an expert testing this game. I'm sorry if that's insulting, but, there are, literally the hotfixes they put out. For example, like I said, how they did a bunch of buffs to guns. Let's say the 1 week I remember they buffed the King's Call, and then some random guns, like a Star Helix, a Lob Shotgun, and ASMD Sniper Rifle. Well, the King's Call did not receive its buff, and if you literally load up the game and shot the King's Call that day, before and after the hotfix, there was no difference. It was bugged. They had to update it again in another hotfix. But my thing is that it's not like this happened once. There was a hotfix that didn't work every single hotfix they put out. And every single patch they put out, every single hotfix they put out, there was at least one, and sometimes more, every single week. Every single hotfix they put out. And, I do not say those words lightly. There actually was, because there is evidence of it on Lazy Data's Twitter, because Lazy Data tested every single hotfix, and every single one of his posts reports one of the guns not working, or one of the hotfixes not working, and then he tags the game devs online. And to me, it's bro, Lazy Data posts that and uploads it 30 minutes later. He literally tests every gun in 30 minutes. And he finds out that one of the hotfixes don't work in about 30 minutes. And, should I feel like a dick for pointing this out? Or am I just pointing out the obvious, that they did not test their hotfixes or their patches and a lot of other really obvious stuff within the game? For example, tons of skills didn't work when the game launched. Let's talk about on Zane specifically. In fact, there was a very, very popular thread promoted by the YouTuber Ryan Central, who is a very popular YouTuber. I think he actually does Valorant now. And he promoted this Reddit thread where he listed every single bug on Zane on launch, a week after launch. They had a full bug list for Zane's entire skill tree, as well as just lots of other skills that were obviously bugged in obvious ways, as well as players bringing obvious bugs to the devs' attention, whether it was through the Gearbox forums, through some sort of contact through third parties on Discord, because before I joined the Borderlands team, I used to have a contact of someone who talked to, who had some sort of contact with Gearboxes, and believe me, they had bugs reported to them from me before I joined the Borderlands team, okay? And I'm allowed to say that because that was before I joined the Borderlands team, so there was no NDA yet, and it happened. We reported bugs to them through the Gearbox forums, we tagged them on Twitter, I made YouTube videos about them. They were definitely aware of a lot of these obvious bugs, and a lot of these fixes should have never made it through testing in the first place, because a lot of this stuff was extremely obvious, and then second of all, just are still not fixed to this day. Distributed denial on Zane does not work with legendary shields at all. It was the capstone of his green tree, and one of the major issues, and not the only one, with why his green tree is still horrible to this day. There's a total of 2 skills, 3 skills, maybe 4 skills maximum out of the entire tree that are actually good. And I know some of you Zane nerds are going to be like, well, look at my Calm Cool Collected build. It still works. And yeah, that's because you're using power-crept weapons in a power-crept game. And that's fine. I'm glad you're having fun with your Calm Cool Collected build, because I really like Calm Cool Collected. But come on, you feel me on why distributed denial needs fixed. Because if you're a Calm Cool Collected player, you should like distributed denial. But it just doesn't work with anything. And I can prove that because there's a video on my channel that you can go check out that literally lists all the effects of distributed denial with every legendary shield to this. And that was one of the bugs reported on Ryan Central's Borderlands thread week 1 of the game. And you know their fix? They removed it as a capstone. I'm sorry, but this is insane. Another thing I need to bring up is Zane's purple skill that used to be broken. Commitment. They knew that commitment was bugged before it was even released. The content creators with early access exposed this because I had early access, and once again, this is an NDA, because they allowed us to show the DLC, the arms race skill trees before it was released to everyone. There are videos on my channel of me showing the arms race skill trees before this stuff came out and exposing that commitment was bugged. And what did they do? They put out a blog post right here where they fixed it months later, and they said the intent for this skill was always to stack as many times as Zane's other kill skills, which is twice. When its increased stacking was discovered last fall, we determined we would leave it in the game as it wasn't causing catastrophic issues. As part of balancing for the upcoming content, however, we deemed it necessary for the stacks to be capped as originally designed. And this is just insane, because it literally proves to me that they willingly allow bugs in their game if it's not causing catastrophic issues, and then they fix it later on a whim. Because, like, I'm sorry, but what did Hemovorus provide? Like, actually, somebody tell me what Hemovorus, like, the reason this skill actually needed to be nerfed. You can still melt this boss on Zane without this skill. So on a whim, they decided to fix a bug to just send a message to the community that they're fixing this bug, I guess. And meanwhile, in the same one, they said they were going to nerf Moses' mayhem scaling. Like, they put mayhem scaling on a skill that scales with your mayhem guns. The mayhem scaling in Moses' skill makes no sense. As much as you guys like it, I'm not calling for it to be nerfed either, because I think overpowered Borderlands characters are fun, and I think they need to add a real difficulty system for the players who want more difficulty. But I think overpowered Borderlands characters are fun, so I'm not calling for it to be nerfed. But I'm just like, why? I don't know. Do you guys get what I mean? There's no rhyme or reason. There's no thesis or fundamentals or theory for this stuff to be based on. And, yeah. So, yeah. With that being said, that's it for this video. Sorry this was a 40-minute video. But, yeah, like I said, this was going to be a Reddit-styled angry rant to conclude my Borderlands adventures. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I love you guys. And also, I started a game company with one of my best friends in real life called Tier 1 Game Design. We are selling a game called Escape from Stoneheim. If you guys want to see me teach you guys how to play it, here I am teaching you guys how to play Escape from Stoneheim. And it's just a little card game. It's really fun to play at parties or something like that. It's spooky and Halloween themed, and I know, perfect. We released it in November, right? But yeah, it's kind of like Uno. It's cheap, and I would appreciate it if you guys at least just check this game out. Check out our website. And yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm out.